Hello and welcome.
Hi.
I'm excited. I'm joined by Taylor Bitzoli, and she's sharing about the magic of numbers. So, bookkeeping 101, best practices, myths, tips. Who knows what we're in store for? Welcome.
Yay, I'm so glad to be here. This is so much fun. I love talking about all things bookkeeping so that women especially have a better understanding of what to do for their business until they're ready to outsource and hire a bookkeeper.
I wish I met you 3 years ago. Or 10 years ago. Who knows, right? I've had a couple businesses, but yes, numbers have intimidated me, scared me. I've had a CPA. You get random advice. You read one thing, H&R Block and TurboTax tell you one thing, QuickBooks tells you another. So we have an expert today.
Yes. Yeah, and your CPA only wants to talk to you at certain times of the year. If you're asking them a question now, they're like, nope, I'm on vacation.
True story. And then when you do talk to them, they need everything yesterday. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even know where half this paperwork what? So before we dive in, you want to give us a little background on you and how, like, your magic of numbers and how it led you here to your own business?
Yes. So I have spent the last 6.5 years in the corporate accounting space, and I feel like it kind of dulled the magic of numbers in lots of ways because of the long hours and just like not actually doing something that I was passionate about. And I started my business so that I could help other entrepreneurs kind of understand their numbers and do it in an approachable way where it's not as intimidating because I feel like the culture of like accounting, CPA, numbers is very male driven and can be really intimidating for women business owners, especially when like their businesses are kind of looked down on because they're like, oh, they're not real businesses, or like this is a cute side hobby. So I feel like I want to help women embrace those numbers and learn that their businesses are real businesses and they are a real way to make money, but they need to know their numbers in order to do any of that, which is kind of what I help my clients do a lot of the time, is understand what's going on in their business, how they can kind of use those numbers as data and get answers they need to know how their business needs to grow. So I like to look at money as data instead of looking at it in the form of money, because I feel like the topic of money intimidates people, but the topic of data usually empowers people.
It's a very good point. I just had like a perceptual shift there. Yeah, because I think the part that intimidates me is, am I in the black? Am I in the red? Am I, like you said, am I in side hustle or am I growing? Like, how do I know? And that fear or not wanting to confront it has hurt me in the past. But then when I've looked at it, I've been pleasantly surprised. And the data, you're right, it points you in the right direction. It shows you what's actually doing well, so you don't have to run off of a gut feeling. It's like, no, all these people like this, you should make more things like this.
Yes, exactly. And that's the information that so many people are missing out on because so often they're focusing on the wrong point that they think is making money or the thing that they love the most. And like the other thing that they're not really focusing on is actually what's making them the money and like they should be focusing on. But since they're just looking at either their reports that just kind of say the bottom line at the end of the day, or they're looking at nothing and just kind of flying the plane as they're building it, they're missing out on so much important information. So that's why I tend to say that money is just data and it's not actually money. And if your social media following was in the red, then you'd be trying to figure out how to make it better. So why aren't we doing that with our money?
Right. And if you don't know, you can't grow.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And like, just bite the bullet, see where you are, good, bad, or indifferent. It's data.
Yeah.
It's not your report card. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you're not successful. It is just where you are in this moment, and you have the power to change that.
And the good part is no one knows about it. It's not like it's getting plastered all over social media that you're bad with money. I feel like a lot of people put it in their head and there's so much shame with it that they get so scared of like actually confronting like their numbers because they feel the shame or they feel like they're like hiding from like the real person they are, or they're not good enough to actually have that success. So instead of like embracing that success, they're like, let me just not look at any of the success. And that way I don't have to embrace it, or that way I'm not failing at doing my business. But by doing that, you're really making yourself have a major disservice because you don't know what's going on and you're missing out on important areas of data. Like if you're spending a ton of money on like expenses that you don't even know you have because you signed up for free trials and now they're charging you like $50-$60 a month for something you're not using. If you're investing in areas of your business that like aren't growing, maybe there needs to be a pivot to invest in areas that are growing. Like, for example, if you're hiring all these people on your team, but actually your course that doesn't require any hires is doing better, like, is there a way that you can cut down on your hires and focus more on selling that course or that project that doesn't need as much back end support because your business isn't bringing enough money to help with that? But on the flip side, are you not hiring when you should be hiring? Because instead of hiring, you're just burning yourself out to the ground and you're basically back in the same place as when you were in your corporate job.
We did not say, I want this business to be burnt out, right? We want that time and financial freedom, more time with our family, our friends, to get our nails done, to go get a massage, and to still be successful and have a lovely bank account, right? That's the dream. That's the goal. And it can be a reality. Yes.
Yes, it can. And that's what I think so many people like don't realize is that like you didn't build the business to hire another team. You built the business because it's something that you love to do and you want to spend time doing it. And if you're hiring all these people right off the bat, there's really no money for you to actually take out of the business to enjoy yourself. And then there's also the pitfalls I see people fall into of like they have their corporate job and they're basically just using their corporate job to fund the business. And they're instead of like actually bringing in the sales, they're just investing all this money into the business to try to grow it. But they're not actually spending the time in the business. They're just using money to kind of float it so that it will make enough money, hopefully one day, for them to leave their corporate job instead of making strategic decisions for their business. So my advice for any business owners that are just starting out is to always set aside a lump sum that you want to spend on your business. And once you've gone over that, like you better start making sales. Because if you're just constantly using your corporate job as your business loan or your business credit, it's really just doing yourself a disservice, and you're probably not going to get to a place as quickly to leave your job and just run your business full time. There are some pieces you have to invest in and be strategic about, but you need to be strategic about those things. And you don't need all the flashy stuff right off the bat, which is another thing that I feel like a lot of businesses fall into is I need the marketing, I need the graphic designer, I need the branding photos, I need this awesome website, I need all these social media posts. But I feel like a lot of your clients are going to come from word of mouth at first, and they're going to come from networking, and both of those things are mostly free. So if you are one of those people that want to start your business and you're like, I don't have the startup capital, you probably don't need as much startup capital as you think. And you're actually probably going to do yourself a service because you're not going to just keep investing money into your business and like blindly not realize how much you're actually spending, because that's one of the biggest mistakes when I see people start out that they make.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much good stuff there. I'm just sitting here. I'm like, yep, I did that. So I used to teach fitness classes part-time around my corporate 9 to 5. And when I got started, I was like, oh, this is fun. Plus it feels good. You're dancing.
Yeah.
It's Zumba.
You got to see other people.
Yeah. And I was like, but really I was getting paid to buy the clothes. Like everything I made, I was like buying the Zumba outfits. That was like my first 2 years. Then I was like, well, just teach more classes. So then I was teaching 8 and 10 classes a week and burnt out and tired and using the weekend to catch up. So loved when things shifted to more digital and on demand, because then you have the live and the on demand. But I think that was like the first wake up call where I was like, no, this is a business. Like I can strategize where I spend my time. I don't need to be on the hook for all of this. And I don't want just sushi money, right? Like, or legging money, I want to grow and exit the 9 to 5 and live in the entrepreneurial space. So I do have a lot of folks that are in my sphere that are in that 6 months to a year, or might be in their first 1 to 3 years. 2020 opened up a lot for us. What are some tips or recommendations you would offer them starting out?
I think my biggest tip is that to make sure to set up stuff while you're still small. So a lot of people will be like, well, I don't know if my business is going to succeed. I'm not going to bother setting up an LLC, or we'll get an EIN number and like use that for a while, but then decide they want to be an LLC later on. And the thing is, like, that startup cost to build out the LLC is probably, in Massachusetts, it's $500. It varies kind of state to state, and you do have to pay that annually.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you have to do all those things 2 or 3 years down the road, because then you want that LLC for the legal protection, for the separation, it's going to cost you probably way more than $500 later on to have to reset up everything and to change things over and to change your bank and all of these systems. Because what people don't realize is that you need a new bank account. If you have a savings account, you need a new savings account. You'll need to get a different credit card. So it's going to change a lot of things. So if you are serious about doing the business, or if you're considering wavering on starting a business, set up the LLC, because it's going to be your biggest driver to get the business moving, because you don't want to pay that $500 out of pocket every year. And you also will have that, like, I'm a real business owner. I'm not just kind of like bootstrapping it or solopreneuring it, freelancing. Like, you actually have a business. Not that any of those other things are bad. I feel like sometimes people just need that extra push to like get them to move out the door. And I also think just get started. Like, you don't need the money to invest in all these fancy things. And some of the time, starting a business means figuring out a lot of that stuff and figuring out ways you can do it for free. Like, can you set up your website for free? Just pay for the website software. Can you set up your mailing list for free? You can set up your social media for free. Your posts might not be all that glamorous, but is anyone actually seeing them the first few years in business? And is that where your ideal client is coming from? Because most of the time, it's probably not. Most of the time, your first like year to 3 months in business is referrals. People, again, like networking with other people from groups like Kiki's. Like, when you're meeting other entrepreneurs, those are your best referrals, and you don't need all this fancy stuff. Yes, you can get the fancy stuff down the road, but really, as new entrepreneurs, you can just do a lot of the bare bones stuff. And you don't have to buy every course there is out there and everything that is out there. Like, I've fallen into the trap way too many times of this, or like, this course is going to help me really change my business. In actuality, I don't have time to watch 10 hours of videos on something that's not really going to help me in the moment. And I probably just forgot about it after I bought it. So I really like, and I've now gone through, like, if I'm going to buy a course, I like check with my mentor. If like, I think she thinks it's worth it, I'll check with other people in the industry to see if they've taken it, or like if they think it's worth it. Because there are so many courses out there. I'm not talking about quick courses. I'm talking about more expensive ones that like you actually are investing in and they're costing you money. Like, if you're not going to follow it through, it may not be worth the investment, especially up front. And it could be something you could wait for like a year down the road, or even a few months down the road, once you have some income, because a lot of them are expensive. And if you don't have the time, you're probably just buying it and it's kind of like helping you, but it's not really helping you because you're not going to do it. And that's one of those things that I like. It's so hard because like sometimes it's great, but sometimes it's like also like you would have been better off investing in something that like you're connecting with other people, because that's where you're going to get so much more return, especially now.
Yes. So 2 things. I had this whole proprietorship, and I will say when I got the LLC years later, I felt more legitimate, and I was able to get the liability insurance. I was able to rent spaces, like more things opened up, and the liability insurance, like the permit to do business, or if, all of that is a lot harder. And I got denied as a sole proprietor. So yes, LLC out of the gate. And I'm in Maryland. It's $300 a year here. I think Virginia is like $120. So check your state.
Because it could be even cheaper.
Right.
Boston's the most expensive of all
Right.
places. So.
Yeah, my girlfriend told me hers was $120 in Virginia, and I was like, dang it, because I used to live there. I was like, I should have started there before I moved, because then you can get into registered agents, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, then that makes a whole other mess.
Yeah. But, and then just on the topic of courses you brought up, uh, I had a combination, right? I had all the free courses and I had a folder. There are still like 5 or 6 in there I've never gone through. And I do believe if you don't pay, you don't pay attention. It's so easy for me to say, oh, it'll be there forever, right? It was free. And a lot of companies did that in 2020. We were all home, we had all this extra time. And in my head, I had every intention of like going through and learning and getting certificates. But in actuality, it's like, what are the revenue generating activities? What are the things only I can do? What are the things that light me up, that I enjoy doing, and doing more of those? And yes, the courses, 500,000, 2,000, they're 6 week, 6 month, 1 year mastermind. Like I've invested at different stages and it has catapulted me and my business into new stages. But how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
Oh, and I love that you said you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles and gadgets and sparkly things, because no, you can get super scrappy. You have a cell phone, and most of us either have an iPhone or a Google Pixel. Both have phenomenal cameras. You can take your own photo shoot at home, like do your makeup once, 3, 4 tops, kitchen, outdoors, whatever. You can get rid of the background and put it on anything. And that's like 6 months worth of graphics.
And even if you don't want to take your own, with the way like things are getting seen now, you could get like 10 branding photos or like a mini shoot or something and just keep repeating them, because odds are the audience that you have at 10 followers is probably going to forget by the time you have 100, 200, 300 that like they're seeing the same thing. Now, I'm not a social media expert, but it is a great way to save money because you can just keep repeating it and just changing the content on it and no one noticed. I do it all the time.
Yes. And another hack, I used this when I was very early on in my Zumba fitness career. Colleges and people graduating either social media, marketing, photography, videography. If you want videos, you can reach out to the heads of those departments and say, I'm looking for someone to do this and trade for testimonial, and they can use my work in their portfolio. It's a win-win. It's free. So you don't owe them anything, the testimonial, and you just sign a form so they can actually have a portfolio when they graduate. So you're helping someone else and you get gorgeous photos and probably have a relationship where you can then work with them in the future. I know the woman I worked with at the time gave me half off a lot of her packages for like the first 6 months. And
That's awesome.
It was great. So look into that.
And you're helping kids that are, I guess not kids, young adults that are trying to build their own businesses or their own portfolios and kind of jumpstart their careers.
Yeah. And it's just a win all around. And then it's one less thing you have to worry about because they've already done the filters and the fancy stuff. And then they just deliver it to you. And it's like, thanks.
They make it look beautiful. And you could use like Canva and all these other things for logos and saving yourself so much money up front so that you have more money to put aside for yourself or to leave your corporate job.
Yes. Amen to that. All right. What other tips do you have for us?
So I think too, if you are someone that's on the cusp of like, I want to leave my corporate job, I don't know how to save up, I don't know how to get to that place that's going to give me that salary I need to kind of replace that, it's also helpful to kind of figure out what you need to live on for a monthly basis. So figure out your bare necessity budget. So like what covers all of my bills, and then add in like, okay, I like to spend like $500 a month on like extra things, which right now that's probably not really reasonable because of how much everything costs. But if you want to be scrappy, 500, probably more realistically like 1,000. And that's probably the amount of money you need to be making in your business a month so that you can pay yourself what you need to survive. And I think that's where a lot of us make that calculation mistake. But also, if you are really serious about taking your business full time and paying yourself, make sure that you're using, like, can you cut expenses? Do you need all the things you're paying for on a monthly basis? Can you get your budget down a little bit more to be more scrappy? And then if you are someone that's in that, like, I'm ready to jump space, stop taking money from your business and kind of keep it as a lump sum in that business, because then you're going to have months worth of money that you're able to take while you're still kind of getting those clients. Because it does, like, once you transition, it does take you a little bit more time to kind of ramp up the clients. Even if you have a bunch of them knocking at your door, by the time you get them onboarded, by the time you get them set up, it will be a lot more helpful to have like a side in, like, your income's already there, so you don't have to worry about it, and make sure your emergency funds kind of to a place where you can use it for 3 to 6 months because you might need to draw from it. And that's what it's for. And if you're like me, anytime you take money out of your savings account, you're like, I'm cringing even though this is the money that I set aside for this purpose. I'm like, I don't think I can make this transfer. I'm like, do I have enough money in my checking?
I love that. So you brought something up in terms of like, when do you take a salary for yourself? And what are, I guess, the benefits to that versus just having like one big account and you kind of take it and pay for all the expenses of the business?
I guess for most solopreneurs and LLCs, a salary is kind of like your owner's draw. So you're just going to take out like a flat lump sum every month. And I like to do every month. Some people do it every 2 weeks, but I like to just be consistent. And most of the time it's easier because you just know what you have. And then when you spend it, that's it. That's all the money you're getting for a month. You want to take an owner's draw or salary as soon as possible. So you should be trying to make enough money that like it is covering that you get an owner's pay. So if you are paying all your money out to other things and you don't have enough to pay yourself, where are things you can cut back on? What can you be doing yourself so that you actually can take a paycheck out of your business? Because odds are, if you're not taking a paycheck out of your business, you're not going to last in business that long because you're either going to have a bunch of other gigs on the side, or you're going to be really miserable and resentful that you aren't able to take that paycheck out of your business. And also making sure that you price your offers right, because this is something that we all have issues with, is like kind of underpricing. So what I always tell my client is your rate, if they come to me and they say, I want to be making more money, is your rate at market rate or is it below market rate? Because 99.9% of the time, whatever rate they came up with, they're like, it's probably like $20 under market rate, because then they're like, oh no, market rate's like, if they say theirs is 100, they're like, market rate's 120, but like, I don't have that experience. And I'm like, yes, but you do have that experience. Or I'm a small business. Yes, well, that's even more reason why your market rate should be at 120 and not at 100, because you are a small business and you do need to have a team behind you at some point, and you're going to need to be paying for that team. And I would go and look at everyone that you can possibly find in your industry, go on their website and see what those market rates are. Is your service appropriately priced for how many hours you're putting into it? Because that's a big thing we do, especially as women entrepreneurs, is we're like, okay, it'll be $100 for like 5 hours, and then you put in 10 hours. And then, so now instead of, actually I should have used 1,000 because that's really easy math. So we'll say $1,000 for 10 hours. Instead of making $100 an hour, you're making $50 an hour because it actually took you $20 an hour. It actually took you 20 hours to do the work. So, and this is obviously stuff that you're going to learn your first few years in business, is figuring out the right price, figuring out how long it takes to do stuff, but also remembering that there's stuff you're not getting paid for that's going to take you time. So like, how can you factor that in to the money that you're getting paid for so that it's actually giving you enough money to grow the business? It is a very delicate balance, but a lot of it comes from making sure that your service is priced right and that you're kind of at where market is. Because when you lower yourself too much too, you're actually doing everyone else in the industry a disservice, because you might get the clients now, but odds are they're not your ideal client, because they're going to want like every penny out of you for like that money they're paying you. And they're not going to be the client that stays around for the long term, because the second you increase their price, they're going to be out the door. So they might be a client to kind of support you as you're growing the business, but just know those aren't the clients that are going to be around because you gave them a lower price. They're honestly probably going to have less respect for you and get more out of you, which I see happen so much. Or it's your friends that also aren't paying you the value that you actually are worth.
Yeah, such good points. So do you have recommendations for, like, I'm bootstrapping it, and is there a software you're like, use this, it will be great, it's going to be easy for a transition when you do decide to work with a bookkeeper?
Yes. So I like Xero for accounting software. It's much cheaper than QuickBooks. I think it's probably half the price of QuickBooks.
Okay.
And it's easy to link softwares that most small businesses use. So like your Stripe can be linked into it. Your PayPal can be linked into it. Your bank accounts can be linked into it. And then that way it eliminates a lot of the work of like putting all of your information into a spreadsheet on a monthly basis. Because if you're putting it into a spreadsheet, you're not looking at it. That is like the rule of thumb, because you're taking way too long to do it. And then by the time you actually get it in there, you're frustrated. It's not actually giving you any information probably the way you have it set up, because you're just kind of putting the numbers in to get a total. And then you're missing out on so much important data on a monthly basis. Whereas if you set up an accounting software, it's going to have categories that you should bucket stuff into. So that will help you know like what you're spending on dues and subscriptions, which is most of your software stuff, what you're spending if you are hiring out some stuff, which it is important to actually figure out what you can hire out, because eventually you are going to burn yourself out if you're trying to do everything yourself. But hire out the things you're not good at. If you're good at doing it or you can figure it out, don't hire that out. Just hire out the stuff that's going to take you way more time than what it's worth. And then that way in the accounting software as well, you'll start to see like what your bank account balance is on a monthly basis, like where you're spending money on, what is your income after all of those expenses come out, because that's where a lot of us like mess up, is like, oh, I'm bringing in $5,000 a month, but wait, so I can take $5,000 a month out of my business, but actually you have $2,000 of expenses and you should be setting aside money for taxes. So I always recommend knowing how much you are bringing in and then what your expenses are, so you know how much you can actually take out of the business at the end of the month. And then also setting aside 25 to 30% of your income after your expenses come out for taxes. So I would set up a separate savings account for that. People that put it in the same account, it ends up really badly at the end of the year because they forget it's in there. They have this big balance and they think they have more money than they have to spend. And then all of a sudden they owe $10,000 in taxes, and their checking account now went from $12,000 to $2,000 and they can't pay any of their expenses. So I always recommend setting aside your savings money into a separate savings account. And if you could get a high yield savings account, that's even better, because then that money's actually collecting interest. Because nothing is more painful for me than seeing like $10,000 sitting in my client's savings account that's getting like a penny interest a month. It's actually a little more now because I feel like savings accounts rates have gone up, but before it was like so small that it was like not doing anything. And then my second piece of advice is also to set up a business emergency fund. So just like you'd have a personal emergency fund, I like my clients to start to work towards putting 3 to 6 months of expenses into a separate savings account, possibly a high yield one if you can get one for your business. And that money is there in case your client doesn't pay you on time. You're waiting for a check to come in, because depending on your industry and depending on who you work with, some larger corporations will take up to 120 days to pay you. And then you know that money's coming in, but you're still waiting for that check. And if you have people that you have to pay, it makes it very tricky. So that money's for that. That money is not for taxes. You can dip into if you don't have enough money. But I recommend putting something aside every month and knowing like what you have, what your business expenses are plus your salary. Because the worst thing I see small businesses do is they run out of money and they just transfer right in from their personal account. It's like the business is afloat again. But then now you're not paying yourself this month. So hopefully you have enough money in your personal account to cover your personal expenses for the month, because now you just floated the business. So if you work towards building that emergency fund, even if it's $100 a month, it doesn't have to be as aggressive as like your personal emergency fund, but just to have something. Because I know once people start to hire employees, they're like, well, what if I don't have the money to pay them? That's kind of like your little fallback if you need it. But it's also a way to like kind of eliminate having to get business loans. Obviously, at some point you may need to take one, but if you're taking them all the time, and especially now, it's so easy to get a business loan with really crappy interest and really crappy rates, and they'll just give them to you with little information and not really caring, because they're either attacking your sales, which if you're doing a Stripe or like a Shopify loan, they're just coming after every single one of your sales every month. Or they have like these absurd terms that you would never see anywhere else. And it's like paying weekly payments to things. And it seems really great, but then are you going to have that money every week to pay towards the loan? Like, you can't put that on a credit card. So those are things to be very careful about, and making sure that like you have money set aside and separate it into different accounts. The one account for everything is not a good idea because you're going to forget what's in there. And like, even like I have clients that we have savings goals and there's different savings goals in one account. And it's like always trying to figure out, like, did we move the money out for the savings? Did we just use the cash that we had? So we actually have extra money in there. So by having like a separate account, at least for your business emergency fund and sales tax, it makes it a lot easier to know what you have. So if something does come up, you have that money set aside.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, have a few of those things, but not all of them.
Well, people love the book Profit First, but my problem with Profit First is if you are trying to figure out your bookkeeping and you don't know how to do it, it's going to be a lot of transfers back and forth from like the same accounts. So it can be a lot of work for someone that's like trying to do their own bookkeeping. And like it works because you have different buckets of money places, so you know what you can spend. But then at the same time, if you're not spending the time to do your bookkeeping, are you actually looking at those buckets of money? So I like to simplify it and make it a little easier and make sure that you have your money saved in certain places. But like your income account is kind of your income account. Also, at the same time, most businesses are putting things on credit cards at this point. We're not paying from our checking accounts.
True. Very true.
And it's also a perk because you're getting the credit card points that you can either use to help pay stuff off or
travel. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All the good things. So how would someone know if they're at the point where they can hire a bookkeeper or like start to make that transition? Because I know we all probably want to just hand it off right away. I want to hand it off right away.
Well, honestly, most people can probably hand it off sooner than they think because there are different, at least the way I structure things is I have different levels depending on your business, how much you are charged, because some businesses obviously are a lot simpler to work with than other businesses. So you might be able to hand it off sooner than you think, depending on how much you are willing to invest in it and how much you care about getting that information. Usually it's probably about a year and a half into your business, sometimes a year when you have to get ready for tax season and you're like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But also sometimes people will come right off the bat of starting a business and be like, the first thing I'm getting is a bookkeeper, and look at their numbers every month on a monthly basis. And it really does make a big difference in their business because they are looking at the numbers on a monthly basis and know what's going on. And that way they know, I need to hit my revenue goals. I need to hit my expense goals. I can't just go blow all this money on this thing that like is shiny, pretty object syndrome that we all have as entrepreneurs. So I feel like it depends on you as a person and it depends on how much you're willing to learn. If you're willing to learn and figure out how to do it and get it done on a monthly basis, then you can work on it yourself for like probably a year or two, depending on how much time it's taking you. But when it gets to the point where you're like, I have to give up 2 clients to do my own bookkeeping, that's probably the time that you want to outsource it because it's probably cheaper than giving up those 2 clients. So I feel like it's a balance, but it also depends on what you care about as a business owner. And if getting that data is actually going to help you grow, then I would do it sooner than later. And there are definitely ways to DIY it yourself. And I feel like I put a ton of information out there for people who are trying to DIY it themselves so that they kind of have a sense of how to do it. But at the same time, I have 6 years of corporate accounting experience and bookkeeping experience. So it's really hard to teach that in like Instagram content. So there are ways you can do it yourself in reading blogs, but it also depends on what your level of actually understanding financial concepts are, and are you giving up clients to do it or giving up like weekends come January.
That's awesome. And you also are taking new clients, correct?
Yes. So I am taking new clients right now, and I work with a variety of business owners. So I do take on clients in all sorts of spaces.
I love that. And how do people connect with you? Where do you hang out?
So they can connect with me at Bookkeeping Brunette on Instagram and then on my website, bookkeepingbrunette.com. And then I am working on a DIY course that is launching sometime in September, which is going to have all of the insider secrets on how to DIY your own bookkeeping, because I realized that there is not enough support out there for bookkeepers or for people trying to do their own bookkeeping.
Yeah.
But there is some that you can do on your own once you just get that education. And there are people that are doing it all the time. And I'd rather you do it right than mess it up because you were trying to figure it out on your own and there's no support out there because people don't believe you can DIY it, because people are going to do it anyways.
Right. Or like, I'm just thinking, you mentioned the spreadsheets earlier, and I was like, yeah, I kind of live by a Google sheet right now. Now I'm odd. I do look at it every month and I like to see what changes.
But I like that because that's what's helping you grow your business, because you know what's going on. And a lot of people don't have the patience to do that every month either, or even know how to use Google Sheets.
I mean, I started with Excel, but like I've become Mac and Google girl now. So I'm like, oh, these are the things that feel like home to me. But as soon as that comes out, do you have a wait list or anything set up for that?
I have you can get on it from my website to join my email list. And then I'm going to be sharing a special offer with my email list first.
Perfect. So I'm going to add all of your socials and your website so everybody can connect with you in the show notes. And that's super exciting.
Yes. So I'm excited about that so that I can help people, especially before tax season, because I know that's when all the questions come out.
Yes. Tons of questions. And you think you know the answer, and then I don't know. I've been using TurboTax and doing my own for a while. And even when you sign up for a live person, they ask questions and I'm like, I already answered that like 4 times. Why are you making this so hard? Is this different? Am I in the right?
I know. I always get questions from my clients from their from their CPAs through my client, and it's always the most like bizarre thing. And I'm like, just have them email me, and they're like, oh, you can do that, and I was like, yes, that would be easier, because by the time they translate the message to me, it's like I don't even know what the CPA is asking sometimes, or the client's more confused. And I'm just like, just let me talk to them and we can figure out what's going on, because they will, of course, use the most complicated term that's actually the most simple thing, but they just put it in their like fancier wording, which I realize all the time. Sometimes I'm even like, why would you use that term? Like, I've never heard that before.
So you're the number whisperer. I love it.
Yes, that's what
yes, take me out of it. Just ask the questions.
And sometimes it's like, I think they do it just so they kind of make it seem like their job is way more important than whatever you're doing. But then I'm like, but it just doesn't make any sense. Like, just use terms people know.
Yeah, layman's terms. Just break it down super simple. I love that.
Yes, which I try to do when I talk anything numbers, because I know that like the terms are confusing, but they're actually very simple things.
I love that. And that I don't have to learn a whole other thing or get another degree to do my own numbers is like, I'm really excited for your course. I think that was the first thing I messaged you about before we hopped on a call. And I was like, I like, she speaks my language. She speaks a language I understand already.
Yeah.
Because
I don't like the terms either. Then they make me have to think more. And I'm like, but this is really easy.
Yeah. I remember taking accounting 101 because my counselor in college, I guess you'd call it. They advisor. She was like, oh, you're so close to a business minor. That's not what I was going for. And she's like, take an accounting class. I remember being in the basement. It had no windows. The professor, super sharp, but monotone. I dropped that class after week 2. I couldn't do it. And he kept talking about apple carts. I'm like, can you talk about clothes or like retail or something we understand? Like apple carts have been out of style for eons. Like,
well, it's like whoever writes the textbooks wrote it like decades ago and they've just like updated the pictures, but like they're still the same old things. And like most of the professors, if you even ask them a question, have no idea how to explain it to you or even talk to you in like a term that you understood. Because I like half of my college career, I'm like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to work in the corporate world. And they got into school or my corporate job, and I was like, oh wait, this makes way more sense. Like, and also there's systems where they're teaching you how to do it, like so you can do a math problem on a quiz.
Right. Well, and I was like, can you put this in real life terms? And I gave him a couple examples and he just went right back to reading the book. But I was working retail and I remember chatting with my boss and my manager and I was like, debits and credits, and can we use what, and it was a jewelry store. So she's like, oh, this vendor has this invoice and we have this many pieces from them. And I was like, oh, and I got the answer like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just need real life stuff.
Yes, that's why I always, if you always ask me a question, I have a candle next to my desk and I'll use that as an example for anything that I'm talking bookkeeping related, because I'm like, everyone knows what goes into a candle. So everyone will understand what I'm talking about based on this candle.
Okay, so now you have to tell us about the candle.
Well, usually it's more of like, this is my candle. It's actually like a meditation, grounding, stress relief candle. But what I like about it is that if you're talking like cost of goods sold, which is like the cost of items going into your product, like candles are really easy to use because your product is your glass, your wax, and then the wick inside your candle. And then also like your label that goes on the candle. And that would be like considered your cost of goods sold. But if you're a service-based business, it's not as simple as like these ingredients, but it would be like the labor that's going into your service. So if you're like a bookkeeper and you hire other bookkeepers, the other bookkeepers would be part of your cost of goods sold. And then like your candle is considered inventory, or like the materials that go into it are considered inventory. And then when you sell it, like the expense is what you should be figuring out for your profit is what is your revenue for the candle to actually sell the candle, and then what is the cost that it takes you to make the candle. So all of these components that go into the candle. So that way it makes it a lot simpler because everyone knows what goes into this and how much they cost.
Love it.
So I use it a lot because I'm always like, and then I feel like it's very relatable to people because people know what goes into candles and don't know what goes into apple basket.
Right. Fruit cart, like you want some made grapes? I don't know.
At least entrepreneurs do, because most of us.
Yes. No,
most of us are a little spiritual.
I love it. Well, are there any last minute thoughts, tips, or ideas you want to leave the audience with before we say goodbye?
I think I'm on a feel about this lately. Make sure that any contracts, anytime you work with clients, get a contract, because I've had a bunch of clients lately that have not signed contracts and are not getting paid because they didn't sign a contract. So make sure that you always sign a contract. And then don't forget about your retirement as an entrepreneur. So many of us are entrepreneurs because we don't want to be in corporate, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to retire someday and stop doing our job. So make sure you aren't forgetting about your retirement when you're trying to figure out your planning, or make sure you max out as much as you can from your corporate job before you leave, so you have that money in there. Because I notice so many entrepreneurs do not set aside money for retirement. They might be doing it on once they take their personal owner's job, but I have a feeling they're not. So just remember that you should be doing that still, even as an entrepreneur. It is important because someday you are going to want to not run your business, as surprising as that sounds.
Yes. There will come a time where you just want to play again and be free and travel.
Yes. Or breathe for us.
We'll just buy one of the meditation candles now that we know how much it costs. No.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. This was enlightening on many levels. I really appreciate it. And I feel like I have a better handle on what my next steps will be for my money matters. So I appreciate you. I'll add those links. We will keep an eye out for your course in September, and probably have to have you back again because I feel like there are multiple layers of numbers when it comes.
Yes, there really is. And there's always so much to talk about. So
we're just scratching the surface, but yes. I appreciate.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
My pleasure. I love our chats. Awesome. So thank you to everyone who was here watching live with us. And if you're catching the replay, if you have any questions, drop them below. We'll pop back and do our best to answer them in a timely fashion. Bye, guys.